rather than driving for stricter and stricter concentration limits, but not volume limits. With this, there was this refrain: the solution to pollution is dilution.
I like it.
And that was a very flawed approach, but there wasn't a good set of alternatives. And so how do you create a mass reduction rather than concentration based? Because when it gets out to the bay, it's how many ounces or pounds out there, not what went in.
That's an absolute.
So that's what Palo Alto ended up adopting.
Gotcha. All right, we should probably get rolling here. Are we up on?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, then with that, I will call to order the August 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Climate Action and Sustainability Committee. And I have to say, I am looking forward to this. These are two good items to chew over. But before we get to them, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Burt.
Here.
Councilmember Lou. Chair Banker.
I am here and I realized I did not have my mic on earlier. So
Okay.
welcome again. We're called to order and two of us are here. We have a quorum. All right, so let's move to public comment on items within the purview of this committee, but not on the agenda. Do we have any?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, with that, we'll close public comment and move to standing verbal reports. And I think I'm looking at Director Eggleston.
Yes, thank you. Brad Eggleston, Director of Public Works, and I have a couple updates from staff. So one has to do with the Youth Climate Advisory Board, or YCAB. And so just to let everyone know, the new YCAB term officially starts on September 2nd. The members have been selected, so we will have 11 high school students that come from Pali, Gunn, Castilleja, and Kahila high schools. And then I'm going to walk through a new thing we're trying to do, which we're going to call our Sustainability and Climate Action Communications and Engagement Report. Really just an opportunity to share some of the engagement that's been going on and upcoming in this staff updates part of the meeting. So looking at the second quarter of the year and July, in terms of noteworthy efforts and things that have been completed, we conducted a giveaway campaign for a heat pump water heater to encourage program participants who had got involved but hadn't yet signed a contract to actually move forward and do the installation. We had 143 residents sign up for the program. 29 contracts were signed, 34 water heaters installed directly related to that effort. And we've selected the winner, but not yet announced that. So that'll be coming soon, along with the photo and video testimonial that will result. Also recently, we mailed a postcard about the heat pump water heater programs to all single family homes in Palo Alto. So about 15,000 homes. And specifically as well with that, calling out information on the emergency replacement program. And then many community members, I think, should be aware that California Tech incentives, the tech program for heat pump water heaters and heat pump HVAC systems, those were announced a couple months ago. We as a city have launched outreach in July and have marketing on that's continuing until those funds are exhausted, which is, I'm hearing projections that's likely to happen as early as September. So not a long-lasting opportunity there. And then additionally, the lawn signs that we've talked about, and I think showed in this meeting recently, that promote home electrification are available now. And we have an online sign-up sheet available. And we wanted to specifically thank the SD 350 volunteers who brought 25 signs to distribute at the 4th of July chili cook-off. So hopefully we will start to see those around town. So that's a report on some of what's happened and then some upcoming things as well. So in terms of outreach and engagement, we are launching a new contract to enhance and complement the communications and engagement efforts. That should be happening soon. The first efforts on that will involve auditing the existing work And then we'll be creating an annual strategy, which is something we hadn't completed under the previous contract. We're finalizing a mailer with a sticker for single-family homeowners to place on their gas water heaters. That will include emergency safety tips, resources, and information about switching to a heat pump water heater when the time comes. So again, that'll be all single-family homes via social media series and a digital e-blast. There's a new home electrification social media series that's starting this week. That'll be sharing programs, resources, and educational information about the benefits of home electrification. And then, not sure if we mentioned this one to the committee before, but we're starting a refer a neighbor campaign as part of the heat pump water heater program. We're expecting to launch that this quarter. Essentially financial incentives for people who participate in the program and refer their neighbors who then participate. We're expecting to have a $50 incentive for the person who refers someone else who participates, with the new participant getting a $100 incentive on their installation. And then lastly to mention, I said we've got these new incoming YCAB members. So we're starting to collaborate with that team on some upcoming efforts to share Instagram posts, reels, and stories that will be things created by teens and curated for teen audiences. So back to you, Chair.
Well, great, and thank you. I've got two quick questions. One is for those stickers on gas water heaters that can give like transition tips essentially. Does it also mention the emergency replacement program? Is that part of what people might, I know it's a lot to put on a sticker, but that's, I think.
I'm pretty sure we're doing that. Yeah, that'll be an important component.
Because that's what we want them to see at that moment if they haven't thought of it before. So that's great. And the second thing is with the new YCAB, which I'm glad to hear about. I know they report to staff or managed by staff, but is there any time when we could have sort of an interaction with this committee, for example, some way so we can thank them if nothing else?
Yeah, I think at any time we could do that. We could have them come even as part of this segment of the agenda. And give some updates.
Except
they're in school. That's a good point.
Well, maybe we could have a little reception toward the end or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's think about that, or we can
out.
schedule one a little later one time. So yeah, that'd be great. All right, thank you. Do you have any questions?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to committee member comments and announcements. Pat, do you have anything you want to share?
Just one question. Is our next scheduled upcoming meeting on the 5th? Why do I have it in my calendar so soon? Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And in fact, we've got scheduled meetings on the 5th, the 19th, and currently on October 3rd. That one we're going to try to reschedule because Councilmember Wu is unavailable on that date. And really this had to do with council and staff as well, coming back from council break and vacations and things. And so we ended up pushing out this August meeting to a later date.
Got it. So on the 5th, we have a big tour of MTC leadership that's being hosted by VTA. Not only starting at the University Avenue station, but going throughout the county. And that's scheduled to run, I think, until 3:00. I was thinking that if we were able to start this one later, that might be the meeting where we can invite the youth group and they'd be out of school, but I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, thank you. That would work for me. Why don't we check with Councilmember Liu so that he doesn't miss a second time, and if he can do it, and if it works for staff. I know there are some Friday afternoon train schedules and things that we have to accommodate, but why don't if we could check on that and circle back, or do you know
Yes,
right now that it will or won't work?
No, I don't know that it can't work.
Okay.
So yeah, let us check into that. And just to be clear, the suggestion is to have the meetings start at 3 p.m. instead of 1:30.
I believe
Yeah, I
so.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
3 or 3:30. Good. maybe 3:30 is too late.
Yeah, I just worry about 3:30 depending on the agenda. Let's look at, see how heavy the agenda is. So,
It's a rather important agenda, so it's the 2025 reach code updates, and
Right.
this would be consideration of an or recommendation to council for the following Monday for an urgency ordinance
Right,
that would allow us to adopt a new energy reach code items, you know, while maximizing our chances of having them effective given AB 130.
right. There's a time sensitivity there.
And there's also an item on the city's role in facilitating compliance with the air district zero NOx requirements for water heaters.
Got it. All right, well, let's take that into consideration and see what we can do at 3 or 3:30. 3:30 might be tough, but let's see if we can accommodate that. All right, thank you. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One, with NCPA, the general manager, Randy Howard, has announced his retirement, effective probably the end of January, around about thereabouts. So the executive committee, we have begun tasks toward a search and to find a successor. So that will be underway this fall, but obviously Randy has had a lot of years a lot of experience. It's a very big position and a position that will impact this city. So it's a serious and significant thing. So I wanted to share that with people. The air district is dark in August, so I have no update there other than to say that to invite, and it may go along with our next meeting, but to invite any concerns or questions that people have to feel free to reach out to me or the air district directly, because recently I've seen a lot of misinformation circulating about those rules, and you know, it's fine if people have concerns about the rules, but I'd like it to be based on the rules and not some mischaracterizations thereof. So I just wanted to mention that. And then finally, somewhat relevant to our first action item today, the Recycling and Waste Reduction Commission of the county meets on Wednesday. I will be here in this room if anybody wants to join me at 5 p.m. But the agenda includes things like Santa Clara University's reuse program for students. And so I'm curious about, you know, its applicability to Stanford, the multi-jurisdictional composting education program, a countywide solid waste services annual report, and of interest to everybody these days, exploring mitigating wildfire impacts through proactive household hazardous waste collection. So there's quite a few interesting topics that folks who are interested in this committee might also be interested in that commission work. So that's next Wednesday. And that's what I have.
I'm sorry, that reminds me of one other thing I wanted to raise, whether it's be brought before this committee or the council, but we had an informational item on the update to our Foothill wildfire prevention plan. And I don't know that it's been every year, but certainly in the past, we've had that be a study session before the council. And given the increased community concern in the wake of the LA fires, I was surprised that was just an informational item. And so I was interested in whether that could be either brought before this committee at a future date, if we can't get it as a study session to the council. But I think there's a lot of community interest in it, and either way, I think a substantive discussion would be worthwhile.
Yep. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks for saying, I'll take that note and follow up with the city manager on that.
Okay.
And I want to check because there is an item coming in, I want to say September, maybe not, but I think it wraps this in, but I will check, and I believe it's a study session. Is that?
I know there's something coming up relating to wildfire. I don't remember if it's this specific item, but it's on the upcoming tentative.
It definitely is, and I believe it wrapped in a few extra things because of community concern and because it's been raised. So I will check on exactly what that is, but it's definitely coming soon, and it's broader than I think its initial.
Interesting, because we get the updates from the city manager on upcoming agendas, and there was nothing on there that indicated that. So
it's the upcoming item is the wildfire audit.
But that's wrapped in, I believe, to the wildfire reports that were released this summer and the emergency.
Emergency operations
yes.
plan, I
Yes.
think, is also part of that.
Exactly.
I'm not sure about the first.
Yeah, I believe it is. We've discussed this, but there is a plan to discuss wildfire mitigation, and I cannot say for certain the full scope. I know we've discussed each of those things being part of it, and for it to come in the next couple of months. I just don't know exactly the date. It may have been
I've
just
just
like
gotten a Teams chat message saying that you were correct.
okay.
So
Yay.
it sounds like that whole the universe of items.
Thank you. I didn't want to commit anybody, but I've had several conversations about making exactly that happen. So good. Yay. Okay. So we're gonna do that. All right. I think we're all have similar interest, and we know the community does. So great. Anything else before we move on? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to action item 1, our 26-27 SCAP work plan, the sustainability piece. We did the climate action piece. And I just want to say to staff that when I read through the staff report, it just made me smile. You know, in this climate, in all sense of the words, to read about the prospective positive things that are going on was actually a joy. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to you to tell us what's in there.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So just a brief overview of where we are with all of this. So as you all know, we have a sustainability and climate action plan here in the city, which is the comprehensive document laying out the city's strategy to achieve our ambitious carbon reduction goals. And unlike other cities, we include what we call our sustainability areas in our SCAP. So we've divided our key SCAP areas into the climate action areas, which, as Chair Vinker mentioned, we already discussed, and into 4 sustainability areas. And those are the areas that we are going to discuss today. Next slide, please. We are obviously wrapping up our previous SCAP implementation plan. And so we are looking at our proposed priorities for the 2026 to 2027 implementation plan. And today specifically focusing on sustainability. And this is just a very high level overview of the 16 priorities that we're going to discuss today. We have 3 in the water areas, 5 in climate adaptation and sea level rise, focused on sea level rise and wildfire protection, 5 in the natural environment area, which are focused on natural environment and green stormwater infrastructure, and 3 in zero waste. Next slide, please. So for water, we have 3 strategies. The first around water efficiency. So continuing to deploy water efficiency and conservation measures that achieve water savings above and beyond what is required by state regulations. We have a recycled water salt removal to improve the quality of the recycled water produced at the regional water quality control plant. And finally, the water distribution system adaptation, which is to identify the risks from climate change to the water distribution system and implement solutions. Next slide, please. So for sea level rise, the first 2 for sea level rise, the first, it revolves around finalizing the partnership agreement with Santa Clara County on SB 272, the Regional Shoreline Adaptation Plan. This is the legislation that requires neighboring jurisdictions to develop a regional sea level rise vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan, because it recognizes that sea level rise does not care about geographic boundaries. And so we want to work together as a region to create a comprehensive plan. We are also working with Santa Clara County on procuring grant funding. We are hoping to receive grant funding through SB1 and are hoping to hear about that soon. about that funding opportunity. And that will help us identify and align our countywide sea level rise adaptation planning projects. So in addition to our regional efforts, we also want to work on our city level efforts to update our city's sea level rise adaptation policy. And that will including just updating it to include the newest technical information and best practices and the decision-making points for the city, both city specific as well as regional efforts. And to include shallow groundwater changes as well, when we are working on new projects and operation and maintenance. Next slide, please. And the final two strategies related to sea level rise are constructing and beginning monitoring of the Palo Alto horizontal levee project, which is funded, and it will be the first Bay Area horizontal levee to be hydrologically connected to the bay. We're very excited about that project, and we are going to continue our partnership with Valley Water on our sea level rise and shoreline levee improvement efforts. Next slide, please. So the final area in adaptation, climate change and adaptation sea level rise is for wildfire protection, and that is implementing the Foothills Fire Management Plan. And recognizing that the Foothills Fire Management Plan contains a lot of strategies that balance conservation of natural resources with the reduction of fire hazards. We are proposing priority implementation areas over the next 2 years, and these include but are not limited to mitigating the fire risk from electrical equipment, and mitigating fire risk from vegetation through projects such as removing targeted eucalyptus groves in specific areas. Next slide, please. So for natural environment, we are continuing to increase our canopy. This time we would like to focus on increasing our canopy in South Palo Alto and develop programs to not only plant trees in South Palo Alto to increase the tree canopy, but also integrate with other programs and Green Stormwater Infrastructure Program. And this will provide carbon sequestration, improve water quality, capture stormwater when feasible, and hopefully reduce the urban heat island effect as well. And we will continue to reduce pesticide use in parks and open space preserves whenever possible. Moving on to green stormwater infrastructure. For green stormwater infrastructure, we want to design and construct a green stormwater infrastructure project at Juanes Briones Park. This will treat an estimated area of 14.8 acres, 6.6 of which will be impervious. And to increase green stormwater infrastructure on City of Palo Alto property and right of way. And so this includes evaluating planned capital improvements program projects to integrate green stormwater infrastructure to treat additional surfaces. And finally, for green stormwater infrastructure is to quantify the land area that uses green stormwater infrastructure to treat urban runoff. This is something that's important because we need to quantify this amount so that we can have a baseline, so that we can finally address one of our goals in natural environment when we need this baseline for future SCAP work. And last but not least, we have zero waste. So we're going to continue to champion waste prevention, reduction, reusables, and the sharing economy by creating new collaborations with city departments, in particular, like libraries and other community organizations. We want to eliminate single-use disposable containers. We have an existing foodware ordinance, so we want to assess the compliance of those requirements, as well as develop a comprehensive foodware policy plan to expand and strengthen that ordinance. And then finally, we want to continue our efforts to promote food waste reduction. Our zero waste team has lots of public education and outreach initiatives aimed at promoting food waste reduction throughout the community. And this will support and ensure compliance with the requirements of Senate Bill 1383. And next slide, please. So we did have an opportunity to discuss these proposals with the Climate Action Working Group. And the feedback we heard was pretty positive. There was overwhelming support of the Water Smart portal. Everyone thought that was a great asset, and it's very helpful. And there's a huge opportunity to encourage residents to use it to optimize their landscape irrigation. There's a suggestion to raise awareness about practical things that we can do as a community around sea level rise right now, especially around raising awareness that sea level rise is not just it's gonna affect the area beyond 101, but it is also currently affecting the water table. A specific suggestion to propose strategy number 9 on increasing Palo Alto's tree canopy in South Palo Alto was to make that more goal oriented and or make it measurable and achievable so we can track progress. And related to that is a request to have metrics to assess the health of existing trees. And then finally, a request to have more education to the community about impervious surfaces, what they are, why they're bad, and, you know, not to rely on them when there's other alternatives. And finally, after we review this, we are going to bring a final 2026 to 2027 SCAP work plan final draft to the committee for review, and then bring it to council for review and hopeful approval. So, thank you.
Thank you. We told you it was positive and exciting. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Pat, do you want to react first?
Sure, and maybe we'll take a couple cuts because I had a chance to go through it in advance and found it really strong and informative and prompting a bunch of follow-up questions and comments. So first on the adaptation slide, which I think was that slide 2? I should say the key issues that have, it says prepare for climate change. And we talk about sea level rise and wildfires. And one of the things that I've been talking about more is the nexus between wildfires and water impacts. I actually think back a number of years ago, San Cita and San Mateo County actually, I think their annual conference was the fire water nexus. And in our case, there are some really significant potential risks associated with that. One of the biggest and one we haven't been really talking about is that all of our flood protection programs and plans are based upon the protection of a watershed that will hold back our basically flash flood waters. And a major fire in the watershed completely changes our ability to have the flood protection that we've been designing for and building for decades. And even the Creek JPA has not begun to re-examine the assumptions. I think it's probably one of those things that is so radical in its potential impact that everybody's afraid to look at it, but it's real. And I don't think that, you know, hopefully we're never going to have one of the great catastrophic events, but the notion that we won't have a major fire in one of our key watersheds is, I think, overly optimistic. It's more likely an inevitability, and it doesn't even show up on our radar. Then you combine with that the other additional climate change related water impacts, which are that predictions are for more frequent and more severe weather events. And because we're a flash flood, even excluding that potential loss of watershed, we're assuming that we have greater risk going forward. The 100-year event may no longer be a 100-year event. It may be a 50 or 30-year event. And the most severe one may be more severe than what we were assuming. And when we have severe events, a storm comes and it happens simultaneously, typically with storm surges. And in our watershed, that means the water flowing down meets water flowing up. And that compounds everything. And if that happens to happen when you have a king tide, then that's our worst case scenario. So all of those are actually compounded by climate change. And I think we need to, at a minimum, just put down there as an additional topic, which is flooding impacts as a result of climate change. And then from there, we can look in greater depth at what that might be. I had a question on the canopy. It was brought to my attention recently that in a handout that went in the community, we've had this goal and the challenge to go from where we are, which is an exceptionally strong canopy, to our 40% canopy. And suddenly the handout said, well, I think we're at 44% because we're including Foothills Park. Is anybody familiar with that? And the question was, did we add in a new geographic area? But this is in the flyer. So it claimed that we were at 44%, I think. Since this city passed out flyer, it said 44% tree canopy cover achieved. Parentheses includes Foothill Nature Preserve. Now, I don't know what it doesn't include. That was kind of like, wait a minute, did we just pump up our numbers as a result of including cherry picking geographic area? I don't know whether does it include Bixby Park with virtually no trees. I just don't know, but it was brought to my attention and that was surprising. And so maybe we could have a follow-up.
Sure, and we've got urban forester Peter Gollinger
Okay.
in the meeting online. So Peter, can you jump in and address that?
Yes, I can. However, I am unfamiliar with that flyer. The number sounds correct for the entire city limits. Primarily what we focus on in our studies would be the urban areas. So if we exclude the urban areas, we're not at 44%. It's more in the mid 30s if we average them all out.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I would even assume that if we include all of our foothill areas, we're over 50%, because that's about 50% of our geography, and that's primarily canopy. Okay, so glad to hear you agree. I can forward to Brad photocopies of this flyer, and maybe we can get to the bottom of that.
Before you move on, yeah,
Yeah.
just say-
I believe the 44% comes from Google Environmental Insights Explorer data. So Google EIE now includes canopy coverage, but their coverage includes non-urban land as well.
This specifically said in parentheses, Foothills Park was included. So I'm not sure that that's the explanation of what we're looking at, but we'll get a proper clarification.
Yeah, if the data source is coming from Google, it's probably going to encompass the entire city limits versus the tool we have where we try and drill down by neighborhood.
Well, that doesn't seem to explain it to me, because if it was the entire city limits and roughly half of our city limits are virtually a complete canopy in the foothills, that doesn't explain it either. So neither of those things make sense to me, but maybe they're
Well, at
correct.
any rate, yeah, you
Yeah.
can share the flyer, we'll look into
Yeah.
it, and definitely, our the goals and key actions in the SCAP and the KPI is still certainly in terms of the 40% that does not include the foothills.
Great.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you can just reconcile just on this point. Yeah, because what I was what I shared, I think it was after you had to leave, last weekend at the Heat Summit, was that we were at 37 and aiming at 40. So that was the latest I was given. So I think it's just have to clarify what we're talking about when we give these stats.
Those, as Peter said, I think those are the correct numbers for our actual urban count.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then I saw your emphasis on the green stormwater. I wanted to raise that there, as many of you maybe have seen different reports, that there's an increasing understanding of the role of and the harm of runoff from highways. Primarily now with the addition of understanding the detriments of tire runoff. We in Palo Alto, going back 25 years, have been leaders on the copper brake pad, but these other dimensions are really important. And the Caltrans did a pilot on use of filter from using biochar, which I think we've actually done in one of our green stormwater systems. And the question I have is whether those are green stormwater that don't go in to our storm drain system. But should we be looking at filtration systems that run off of our heavily used roadways that are that's a different approach from what we've historically done. But I think we're on the cusp in many places of looking at, we have to do something. Those tires don't disappear into thin air like we kind of assume they do. It's a lot of contaminants and having significant impact. And so just to get that on our radar as a prospective focus area. On the sea level rise that we're already looking at, one of the things that I just want to make sure that we're really including the adequate communication so that the community is aware and our city departments are aware. So one of the things that has emerged recently is that we had our whole fiber to the premise rollout has been held up in part, a series of things holding it up. But one of them was that the elevation of the pad for the hut that we're installing at the Colorado substation to manage the communications equipment on that. Even our utility staff wasn't aware of the increased height requirement, and it's set back the program. And if we don't know from one department to another, then I'm not sure how much of the rest of the community really understands the evolving requirements. So, Karen, you got something to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Karen North, Assistant Director of Public Works. With changing of staff, education is really important. And so we actually just did a training to utility staff regarding the sea level rise requirements. We also have maps that we've also been going around, and Julie Weiss is also online. But she's been going around to the different departments and making sure that people are informed that we have the maps. And also reminding folks about the sea level rise policy that council adopted.
And the specific maps that Karen's referring to are maps in our GIS system that show groundwater levels and I think projected groundwater increase. So that's one of the things that we've been working on in kind of the interim before this regional approach to the adaptation plan gets underway.
Good.
Is building some of these tools that I think speak directly to the concern you raised.
And is that, I assume that means then that like the planning and building permit people in development center are really tuned in so that homeowners are looking at construction, understand this from the outset.
We're working now on rolling that out.
Okay,
These I think were just completed like early summer.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. And the quick question on the horizontal levees. Can you remind me what the boundaries are? Where that horizontal levee system goes to and from?
Sure, this is Karen North again. So the horizontal levee is a permanent pilot. If you go out to the east the Harbor Road. It's the area that's the poor habitat that's kind of near, there's a storm drain outlet. If you're walking on the trail, I don't have the visual to pull up in front of you, but it's kind of near Bixby Park, and then the area is a poor habitat, and then the trail comes back in, and good habitat. It's about 500 linear feet, and that's what we're doing.
Oh,
In
just
front of the
about
sewage treatment
500
plant.
feet. Okay. Part of the reason I bring this, brought it up is, we have within the revised CIP, whether we had a modest, $200,000 budget item for improving the levee system that is, we'll call it levee, it's hardly that firm.
Firm.
That is out kind of in front of the airport, and I didn't know if there was any overlap there. Okay, and then my last question on the water use, and we've had great achievements over 25 years of a 40% reduction in water use. And what I'm interested in is, have we done a projection of our anticipated water use going forward, based on continuing our trend on efficiency combined with the impacts of the new development, which is primarily housing development? And if so, can we see those numbers?
So Carla Daly, Director Utilities. We're in the process of doing a new demand study. The Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency is facilitating that study for all 26 wholesale customers of the SFPUC. We are just now as staff starting to see some preliminary numbers, and we have a lot more questions ourselves, and we're directly comparing those to our urban water use objectives, which is the replacement legislation that happened after the 20 by 2020 legislation expired. So we're not ready to share that yet, but we definitely intend to. In fact, we have tentatively for December on the UAC agenda a first look at that demand study and how that looks to be shaking out.
Thank you. And that's it for me.
Great. Just preliminarily, I appreciate you bringing up the tires and brakes, because we don't hear enough about that. We hear about, tailpipe emissions, but I know you brought them up in the context of runoff and the copper in the brake pads, but there's also an awful lot of particulate matter that comes from tires and brakes, regardless of what kind of, what's powering the vehicle. So I appreciate that. Starting with water and the water strategies, Pat talked about the various flooding risks if there's a wildfire, but you also talked about water distribution system risks from climate change. And could you just give us a little more sense on some of the specific things you're worrying about there? I know you're identifying them, but like what are we going to be curious about?
Sure. This is Alan Kurtory, Director of the utility. So on the water distribution side, we're looking at fire hardening of our facilities. So we have several pump station reservoirs that go up into the foothills. So one of the lessons learned in coordination with agencies in Southern California is really looking at non-combustible materials, defensible space around those facilities. As you may have heard, we provided or have backup diesel generation along all the pump stations. That's one of the objectives that was met this year, and we have those in place. We're also looking at other activities. As you're aware, we're undergrounding the electric infrastructure out there and putting fiber to all those facilities. So there's a lot of activities we are working together as a utility, working with the city in updating those facilities. So that's the latest of what we're looking at.
And we have to do the diesel generators. We can't even do a dual fuel or something. Is that for that size of generators at the standard, or?
Typically, the standard is diesel generation. I believe, and I'll defer to Brad on the use of biodiesel citywide, but yes, diesel generation is the standard.
We use renewable diesel citywide, which does have significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah, well, that's a good start. All right. Well, hopefully we won't need them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to sea level rise, and you mentioned if we get grant funding, do you have any sense of the likelihood? I'm asking the impossible question there. I know we'll know in a couple of months.
From what I've heard, I think the county is feeling pretty optimistic about that and, oh, yeah, but I want to invite Watershed Protection Manager Julie Weiss to speak to that.
Great, and maybe you can speak to, you know, your crystal ball about how likely it is to get it and what happens if we don't. Welcome, Julie.
Hi. Hi, I just want to make sure that you cannot hear me. Is that correct?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, great, because I'm not getting visuals right now, so great. So the county is actually feeling pretty optimistic about the grant, and I have to say, I thought it was a pretty solid a solid proposal that took in a lot of feedback from the participating agencies, the agencies that would be participating if we were able to get that grant funding. And we should be hearing literally just within weeks. The hard deadline is by the end of September 30th, but we're anticipating maybe as soon as within the next 2 weeks. So we're feeling cautiously optimistic, but pretty darn optimistic.
Okay, well, we'll cross our fingers for good news. Thank you. Then I have a similar question on the sea level rise and the outlook for the grant there. That's for the RSAP, sorry, for the RSAP program. I believe that there, let me find your bullet point.
Well, that actually, the SB1 grant we're talking about for the coordinated county effort is for the,
yes, no, I'm misreading my own notes. So the levy, I want to talk about the levy, and yes, it does kind of amuse me as well to call it a levy, because I grew up along the banks of the Wabash, far away, and we had a real levy. I mean, we had shopping centers on the levy and stuff on the levy, so it is a very different connotation here. So one thing I'm just curious about is where we can find, I mean, you just described now the 500 feet and such, but where can we find more information about the horizontal levy?
So there's information on our website. We have a project fact sheet. It's grant funded through the San Francisco Estuary Partnership. This received money through the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. We just had our initial kickoff meeting actually last week. Hopefully we'll break ground in the next month or so. A lot of it has to do with just some of the dealing with construction and constructability. We were hoping to do it within 1 year, but due to delays and the endangered species, it will most likely take 2. But it's a berm, which is essentially, there'll be a true levee at the top, which will be the trail. So the residents in Palo Alto will see the trail will rise up and then will rise down the walking trail. So it'll be a true levee at the back end, closer to the road. And then the rest of it will be a sloping levee so that the salt marsh harvest mouse and the ridgeway whale will have a place to retreat during king tide events or high tides. And then the water that will be naturally seeped, which will be effluent, treated effluent. And that's what Christine was alluding to, that we will be the first one for permitting purposes that will have the water from a treated effluent going out to the open bay.
Yeah,
So
no, it's an exciting project, and so it's exciting to see it move forward. So that's why I was curious about that. And you know, it was just mentioned a moment ago, I don't sit on finance, but I know that there was what you were talking about, and then there was, this is separate and independent, but I'm wondering if it's impacted at all or could be impacted by, the recommendation about, deferring the levee repair for the existing levee. So is there any interaction there that we should know about it? I guess I'm asking both my colleagues and staff.
Interaction between the horizontal levee project and that?
Yeah, and I don't even necessarily mean physically. I'm just wondering if the financial considerations would have any ripple effect here in all likelihood, or if this is independent.
No, they would not. The other levee that Councilmember Burt was referencing is the one in front of the interpretive center. And really, it needs to be built up. And this was part of the finance committee's discussion of budget reductions this year.
Right.
So part of the takeaway from that is whether there's some way we can look at that to get some of the early work, like the permitting started, which is probably going to take a long time anyway, and then accomplish both goals essentially by keeping funding for the project and probably placing it where it's more likely to actually be used.
Got it. Okay, that's what I was curious about, because I had, oh, go ahead, there's some.
Well, I was just gonna say, while we've been talking about the horizontal levy, thank you, Christine. So this is from the city's project webpage for the horizontal levy project. And there you can see where Karin was describing the location there on the road adjacent to the treatment plant.
Okay, that's great. I just, when I heard about the deferral on some funds, because of our budget this year, I just want to make sure it
I
wasn't.
think we have to be cautious on a Brown Act issue and discussion. of
Okay.
this.
I know it'll come.
And as somebody who.
Okay. Okay, that is fine. That is fine. I just wanted, whatever had been made public previously, I just wanted more of a report on that, not to discuss whether we should or not. Okay. Because if it's independent or not, I guess I'll learn more later. Thank you. On the Greenwater storm infrastructure, I want to thank Christine and the team for providing me a lot of great information about that for the heat summit. Fascinating. I love that we're using plants and soil filtration. I think that's just a terrific natural drainage use there. But also the increasing the pervious surfaces is great too. So I don't have a lot to add on that, other than I'm glad to see that on the list. Zero waste. There's a lot of bullet points on the slide about food waste, and so that's great. And could someone describe for me a bit about how we as a city interact with the county program on food waste and the county requirements and the I know there's a financial aspect to that.
So we have Mabo A. Young, she's online. Or would you be willing to take the first stab, Mabo?
Hi, this is Mabel Young, Zero Waste. So regarding the food waste requirement, so currently we are following the Senate Bill 1383. We're focusing on composting. And so we also have our existing recycling and composting ordinance within the city. So and another piece of it would be our edible food recovery requirement that's part of SB 1383 as well. So the way that we address that is through our countywide effort through RWRC with Joint Venture Silicon Valley, where they perform education as well as inspection at our food service establishment that are required to perform edible food recovery. Does that cover everything?
Yeah, I guess what I was wondering is with the SB 1383 edible food recovery program, which I've received presentations on as part of the RWRC, I was just wondering if what if any city operations role we had, like what, or is it just something between the county and the edible food sources? I know it's different for grocery stores versus restaurants, prepared food versus packaged food. Is there something we do with respect to that, or is that just county run?
Yeah, we depend on the county program because it's more efficient that way. For our own staff level, we focus on the education to the community. So we do receive numbers from the county program on pounds of food that is recovered through the different food recovery organization. If you would like those data, we can get back to you with the details.
No, thank you. I can probably get it from them. I was just more curious whether they just ran because I know there are trucks now. They're trying to get people that drop off, fresh food to also pick up the food that needs to move along into the program and things like that. And it sounds like we don't have to do any of the operations piece of that. We just do I know that they spread out the cost, they allocate them by number of, which tier of sources of edible food. And so is that the extent of it, pretty much financial for the city?
Well, we do financial, then our staff also are actively involved in the county program. So we sit on the committees, we participate. As Mava was alluding to, we also do a lot of the education outreach that the county we partner with. So we leverage what the county does, and we also do additional education outreach as well.
So that's great. Okay, thank you. That's kind of what I was getting at. Because what I'm wondering is, we have our food waste and food reduction, and just want to make sure that that's something that is fully represented in our plan, because food waste is such a big source of whether it's emissions or just whether it's wasted food, prepared food that isn't eaten. So, okay, just want to make sure that's fully captured in our sustainability work. Finally, I wanted to ask about textiles, because I don't think I saw much about that in there. And, I'm concerned about, there's a lot of talk these days about the environmental impacts of fast fashion and such. And can I hear a little more about textiles, and not just reusing a piece of clothing, but what if it's to the point it's not really reusable as apparel, but we have recyclable cotton or something? What are we doing about textiles?
Mava, do you want to talk about the reuse wear, and then also the reusable, some of the recycling programs that we have within the city that we educate folks on?
Yeah, so regarding textile, currently it's not considered recyclable at our curbside program. However, it is part of our cleanup day, bulky item day service, where residents can put all of their textile or clothing donation clearly marked, and then those get collected separately and get sent for further reuse, or if it's a bad condition, they get recycled. We also have our repair cafe program, where we are actually actively getting commitment to have 4 a year going forward. And part of that repair cafe program, it also includes some textile repair. So those are the 2 main things I want to mention.
Okay, I guess what I'm so if I'm cleaning out my closet, I should wait till the next cleanup day, I guess, to with any clothes that have not made the cut. It just seems like we might want some greater frequency available for that. Like if there are ones that there are some things where it's Goodwill and there's some things that are not.
Yeah, so our local Goodwill also accept clothing that is still in good condition, but if you have textile that is not in good condition, they do accept rags. So they just need to be marked separately, so then they understand that those will be part of their textile recycling program.
But understanding the purpose of this discussion is to hear areas that the committee thinks should be explored. I mean, what Mava was describing is what we're doing now. We'd certainly go back and think some more about that as to whether there's anything else we might want to include in the upcoming.
That's where I'm going with this. Is I feel that there's a large amount of material to be recycled and dealt with, and I personally don't have a good understanding of what we need to add, because I'm trying to figure out where we're starting. And so I would just ask to make sure that textile reuse and recycling is also appropriately captured for going forward. If we need to enhance, upgrade, educate, enhance, whatever it is, I think that should be evaluated and thought a lot about. I think it's also something that's on the mind of our youth a lot these days with the fast fashion. But just even for me, if I've got bath towels, I don't necessarily want to throw them out, right? I want to do the right thing with them, and I just want to make sure that's captured in the board plan. So that's it for me. Do you want another round on this? Are you good? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's exciting. We'll look forward to when it comes back and the new good work you all are going to do. All right. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 2. The Reliability and Resiliency Strategic Plan, known as the RRSP, status update and feedback request. Mr. Abenshine, looks like you are on.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jonathan Abenshine, Assistant Director for Climate Action, and I'm here to talk to you about the Reliability and Resiliency Strategic Plan. We want to provide a status update today, and also, there's a lot of material here in progress that to update you on. We've made a lot of progress on all the different strategies and actions and in the Reliability and Resiliency Strategic Plan, and that's all in attachment F. But we also made a lot of progress in strategies 4 and 5, and that's what we're going to talk about today. There was a lot of material in the staff report. I don't know to what level folks were able to dig into that. But what I'm going to do here, because I did get the feeling that at the UAC, I was maybe over explaining some of this a little bit on the slides. I'm going to give a quick overview on the slide. And if you want me to dive deeper on any slide, please let me know. We do have on the phone today, Julian Parsley from Bureau Happold, who the team that was the lead. Welcome, Julian. That was the lead for putting together this cost benefit analysis and the overall report, and will be the one developing the overall report on strategies 4 and 5, focused on the cost benefit and potential programs. And we do have a couple of other consultants who have helped us along the way as well, and he'll be integrating their work into the final report. And he's available for questions on any of these things. All right, so we'll be going over these 4 main areas, but first, why don't we review the technologies that we were analyzing in this study? Can we get to the next slide, please? So when we looked at, we were looking at supply cost, the cost benefit of various flexible technologies and efficient electrification strategies on utility supply costs, potential for deferring distribution investment, and then short-term resiliency. And then we also took a look at how how to think about long-term resiliency when it comes to solar and batteries in a lot of different contexts, including the microgrid at the airport. So I'm going to talk about just briefly the findings on time of use rates, and then we'll go into looking at the cost benefit just focused on supply costs and short-term resiliency from all these other technologies as well. So can I get the next slide, please? So we didn't do an explicit analysis of time of use rates for Palo Alto specifically, because it's really it's something that's better studied statistically. And so we had Bureau Happold do research of what other utilities have found when they've done their time of use programs in terms of peak demand reduction. And residentially and commercially, those peak demand reductions have been in the 1% to 6% range. A study across the country, a study specific to California, found a 4.6% peak period load reduction. However, I think it's important to remember that most of the utilities and most of the housing in California is located in places that have much heavier air conditioning loads than Palo Alto does. Now, that may change in the future, but I wouldn't expect necessarily this level of peak demand reduction in Palo Alto. And this was a question that was asked quite a bit by the UAC, so we wanted to make sure to give them some context. Next slide, please. So then to study these other technologies, we looked at Bureau Happold designed several hypothetical programs that the city could run using these different technologies. And this is the list right here. And I think it's helpful to categorize them as demand response, standalone battery projects that are still demand response. They're still responsive to price signals over the course of the day, but there's the added dimension where they're charging and then at one time in the day and discharging at another time in the day. And then what happens when you add solar to those battery projects? Next slide, please. And the preliminary results they found, and I think we've moved far enough along that these are pretty strongly confirmed at this point, is that just on a supply cost and short-term resiliency benefit measure, the costs of all but one of these measures do not exceed the benefits. And I would say that commercial solar, so large commercial solar and battery projects, the benefits do exceed the costs. And in this case, it's largely because the estimated short-term resiliency benefits, that ability to ride through outages, is much more valuable to commercial customers than it is to residential. Without that resiliency value, benefits do not exceed costs. And I'm also going to note that cost benefit is before the ITC goes away. So I think that net benefit likely evaporates as the ITC goes away as well. But when we were first looking at this, several of these technologies were close to positive cost benefits. So commercial demand response, commercial batteries, residential solar and batteries, and commercial solar and batteries. And so we wanted to evaluate whether, if you were to add the ability to defer distribution investment or talk about the value of long-term resiliency, whether that could push these over into positive benefit cost territory. So let's start with distribution investment deferral. Can we have the next slide, please? So give me 1 second. Do you think you could send the slide deck that I linked to you over to Christine? I actually forgot to send it to her, so you'll get yeah, thanks. All right, so we've been working for a year and a half or so to try and get a strong consulting partnership to run a citywide analysis of whether we could defer distribution investment. But as we were going through it, we got to the point where we started to see the potential for a preliminary analysis that we could do. And we wanted to see if we could do this smaller, lower cost analysis and save the $150,000 to $200,000 we were talking about potentially needing to spend to do this full study. So what we did was we took a look at the most promising transformers for deferral. So these are ones where the distribution system is not being upgraded to 12 kV from 4 kV. And that requires you changing out the transformers because they use it's a different kind of transformer to hook into the 12 kV areas. And then of the remaining transformers, we looked at those that were less than 20 years old, where there would be a value of deferring them. And that left us with about 360 transformers of about 1,750 for consideration. Most of those had, they had a wide range of homes connected to them. Only about 30% had 6 or fewer homes. Those are the ones that you'd most likely be able to upgrade or to avoid upgrades, even if you had all the homes electrified. So the number of transformers eligible for deferral we found was actually pretty small. Next slide, please. And even if all of those transformers were deferred at no additional cost, the maximum savings we were seeing was about $1 million a year, which is about a 0.5% avoided rate increase. There might be more savings than this available. There might be feeders or substation equipment that could be deferred, but the transformers are one of the heaviest costs in the residential area. So if you can't get enough savings from that, it seems unlikely you're going to be able to get enough more to make a strategy like this worthwhile. But then you're not going to get that full $1 million per year savings, unfortunately, because the cost. So what we looked at was, could you take batteries and put them on on all of the homes attached to a transformer, tune those batteries to the load on the transformer and make sure the transformer stayed under its capacity limits. And so we did a simulation using AMI data, actual AMI data from 30 electrified homes. That's all that we had. That's all the homes where we had a full year of data. And we did a Monte Carlo simulation. So we simulated random combinations of these homes on all the different transformer configurations that you could have, all the ranges of numbers of homes on the transformer. So first off, we figured that you would need about 2,400 batteries to avoid all 362 of these replacements, and the cost of these batteries exceeds the savings even under optimistic conditions. And the simulation found that even those 2,400 batteries probably wasn't quite enough. So the other challenge here is that using energy storage to do this is really challenging for a small utility. There are other strategies like efficient electrification that could lower costs, but coordinating everybody on the transformer to do the level of efficient electrification that would be needed when we looked at that, it didn't seem like it was realistically achievable to make that happen. The other challenge here is that doing this sort of thing, you would need at least some batteries to defer any of these transformers. And it's not something that you have an industry standard technology and software and strategies that are being used by utilities. So it would be cutting edge, it would be novel, and it would be challenging for a small utility. And you would likely eat up the savings anyway. The $1.3 million number doesn't include program expenses, and you'd really need to implement this very rapidly to make it work for grid mod. And then you'd also lose some efficiencies because you wouldn't be able to just go into a neighborhood and replace everything. You'd have to skip certain transformers, and then those transformers would be upgraded at higher expense 20 years down the line. And then you have construction inflation as well. So just on a whole bunch of different fronts, this did not seem like a promising idea to pursue further. Next slide, please. All right, so next we want to talk about microgrids, because that was another thing we wanted to take a look at. And when we think about microgrids, we're thinking about them, a solar plus battery microgrid that can run both when the grid is out and when the grid is up, can be analyzed as sort of economically equivalent to imported renewable utility power and a backup generator. That's your equivalent alternative to a solar plus storage microgrid. So next slide, please. So what we're getting into here is long-term resiliency. Solar and storage was close to a positive cost benefit. So if you were to add distribution investment deferral is not something that's going to push that over the edge, but what about long-term resiliency? Well, so we don't have a numerical analysis for this one, but I wanted to describe some of the challenges associated with thinking about long-term resiliency. So right now, under our current policies, we pass through all of the energy supply value of local solar and batteries to the customers through our net energy metering rate and our Palo Alto Clean feed-in tariff program. And just, I mean, as you saw saw a few slides back, just on that basis, the cost of solar and battery exceeds the benefit from those programs. But if you value long-term resiliency and short-term resiliency enough, putting that solar and storage on may be worth it for you. And those community members who do value it that highly will spend the money to put it in. What this approach doesn't take into account is any sort of community-wide backup power planning. So the city does backup power planning for its own facilities, but not for looking at what sorts of locations in Palo Alto would be necessary for, in an emergency. You think about things like grocery stores. So we're not reaching out to grocery stores and trying to make sure that they have solar and storage available. And there is also an equity dimension where we don't have any sort of programs to help income qualified customers get solar and storage on. So there are some folks in the community who may not have the kind of access that other folks who value long-term resiliency might be able to have because they can afford it. So some potential alternatives to our current policies include, could include subsidies, paying extra incentives or paying extra through our clean feed and tariff program to promote local resiliency. But then I think the question that comes up is who would be able to participate? And you'd really need to have some policy guidance to decide who you're trying to focus on within the community, and you need to work out the funding to be able to get that done. So if you gave those incentives to everybody, first come, first served, you kind of need to make sure that you have enough funding for everybody to participate. And realistically, that's, taxes or increased rates at the end of the day. You could focus on critical community facilities. You could do limited funding, first come, first serve. That's what we did with the Palo Alto Clean incentives, but that does create an equity issue because only so many people can participate. You could focus on income qualified, or you could just keep the current practice and let people who value long-term resiliency highly install solar and storage. Next slide, please. So also in the context of microgrids, we looked at the microgrid at the airport, and there is a lot of solar potential there. So we were looking at a potential design of 7 megawatts of solar, 12,000 megawatt hours of annual generation, which is about 1% of the entire community's load. And we looked at 3 different scenarios, either just building solar and storage out there and having the utility buy it. We looked at backup, and then we looked at 2 potential backup power situations, either connecting to the regional water quality control plant. And we found that the solar and storage system could give possibly 4 to 8 days of additional operation in January, and quite a lot of extra days of generation in the summer. We also looked at a potential EV charging depot. You could get a lot of vehicle charges per day, even in January, and almost unlimited in September. The idea behind this was if you could put a charging depot in a location where people would use it while the grid was up, and then the microgrid could run it when the grid was down. Theoretically, as vehicle to home becomes more prevalent, people could come over, charge their cars, and then also be able to to use that as a backup power solution. So the challenge here is that the costs of this project are really significantly higher than the costs of importing solar into the community from non-Palo Alto locations. Even when you take into account the avoided transmission costs and the cost of local capacity, the value of local capacity, it still doesn't really pencil out. So you really need to have a lot of value coming from those backup power pieces at the water quality control plant or the EV charging depot and the airport. I'm not mentioning the airport itself. That's relatively small, but that is also a value. And so this isn't a slam dunk, but it's also surfaced for us that we need to do some detailed analysis of what sort of backup power options are available at the water quality control plant. There are alternatives to things like this, like dual fuel generators, you can imagine, for example, that could run off the natural gas system for long periods of time. That could be an alternative or a complement to a solar and storage microgrid. So that comprehensive analysis needs to be done. We're I think, recommending to just put this on hold, or put any further analysis of the microgrid itself on hold until the water quality control plant can do their work. However, I will say that this power purchase agreement price is with the ITC included. And so it's pretty likely that this is going to require a lot of money, a lot of value from the plant in backup power, in payments related to the backup power provided to make it cost neutral to make the costs and benefits pencil out. So we'll see how that analysis comes out. So we talked to the Utilities Advisory Commission. Well, actually, let me wait until we get to the staff recommendation. We shared all this information with the working group. Can I get the next slide, please? Oh, actually, but can we go back before we go off this slide? Doing this analysis also gave us some real insights. Once in a while, we have folks talk to us about neighborhood or cross-parcel microgrids. And this really helped us understand, I think, where those microgrids could be valuable. We think it's when you have a use that is that has enough heavy critical load on the site that it can't and it needs backup power during a major emergency, and it has there is concern about diesel availability over the long term. It's that critical. And I think taking into account that diesel deliveries during a major emergency will go to the most critical facilities. So I think you have to take that into account as well. And there's not enough, and dual fuel natural gas is not a good option, or it's not a strong enough option, or it's lower cost to do solar and storage. And there's not enough space for solar and storage on the site. And there's another parcel nearby that has quite a bit of solar and is able to, doesn't need it for their own purposes during an outage. And that fits the airport and the water quality control plant perfectly. I think it's a little hard to think of many other sites in Palo Alto where all of those conditions fit, but definitely interested if there are any thoughts on that, on those insights. Next slide, please. So we talked with the working group about all of this on Wednesday, and I don't know that they were able to absorb everything that we talked about in the short time that we had. So definitely looking forward to more feedback, and there will be opportunities to give more feedback in the future. But we got some clarifying questions about vehicle to grid cost effectiveness, neighborhood microgrids. Just curious about exactly what I just told you about what our thinking was on that front. And then the timing of when time of use rates would roll out. Commissioner Croft shared the UAC's disappointment that there weren't more opportunities that were positive cost benefit, but shared the UAC's excitement about TOU rates. There was a suggestion to focus on messaging and giving people guides on the types of appliances that they could use to take advantage of TOU rates. Price incentives to make sure people are careful about how much capacity they need and use. Don't oversize your panel. And then just an emphasis on messaging broadly about all these technologies, even if the incentives are not cost effective. All right, next slide, please. So at the UAC, we presented essentially this staff request. What we were trying to do is get guidance and sort of clear guidance from the UAC and from this committee on what direction we want to take the final report on these strategy 4 and 5 analyses. And essentially what we're recommending is that we should be promoting ways people can reduce emissions using time of use rates, that we don't try and do incentives for demand response, standalone batteries, solar and batteries, but monitor the cost to benefit ratios to see if they change in the future, and look for potential low-cost technical assistance programs if feasible. We want to promote vehicle to home and vehicle to grid as it becomes available. Don't provide incentives because of the lack of cost benefit here right now. Next slide, please. We could explore opportunities for large scale solar and battery projects as they potentially become available. We are, I think, engaged with the Coverly design team looking at that, and of course the airport microgrid. We have had commercial customers approach us, and so we would keep looking at those on a case-by-case basis. But of course, continuing to pursue utility scale solar and storage and other renewables. We'd say keep an eye out for people doing things that are innovative in the space of distribution investment deferral, but don't pursue any additional analysis or try and implement programs at this time. And then maintain the city's current policies on microgrids and backup power, but continue the discussion about long-term resiliency to see if there are any additional opportunities. And then, like I said before, keep the analysis of the microgrid at the airport warm while the water quality control plant does its analysis of backup power alternatives. And these 8 items were presented to the UAC in slightly different format. And the feedback from the UAC summarized in the staff report. We received support for this. I would say all commissioners really supported, getting out there and educating and informing people and making sure we're reducing barriers and supporting these technologies overall. And most commissioners, I think, were supportive of pursuing with the staff requests. There was some feedback on things to tweak. The being really explicit about continuing to monitor cost benefits and looking for low-cost technical assistance. Those were both suggestions that came from the commission. So want to make sure that, so we incorporated those into this staff request. All right, it's a lot. Happy to answer any questions and looking forward to hearing the feedback from the committee.
And Jonathan, maybe you could speak to what the future steps are on this.
Oh, yeah, thank you. So as far as next steps, the idea here is to incorporate, we would take this feedback and we would work with Bureau Happel to write the final report about this summarizing this cost benefit, all of the cost benefit analyses we've done. And essentially, we wouldn't really have a lot of program recommendations. Strategy 5 is to bring program recommendations. This staff request essentially leaves us with not many options. And so we recommend, incentive program requests. But what we would be talking about is, low cost technical assistance and then other forms of promotion and outreach and education. That would be the main focus of what we brought to council. And we would be aiming to get that at minimum back to the committee and the UAC by the end of the year, ideally to council as well.
Good. All right.
Including the council item being in addition to what Jonathan just reviewed here on these strategies, kind of an overall comprehensive update on all the different strategies of the plan.
Strategies 1, 2, and 3 before we get to part 5. And
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for that, light and fluffy presentation on a Friday afternoon in the summer, late August. No, this is seriously important to our community, especially as we push electrification. And so we want to make sure that they are assured about the resiliency and reliability. So it's super important. Obviously a ton of work, really appreciate it. You've, as I sort of marched through your topics 1 through 5 and thinking about it, then I got to topic 6 and saw your 8 things. So I think, where you've, sort of coalesced, merged some and developed some recommendations. I think those are we probably have to step through those 8 ourselves. You've gotten feedback from the UAC. Let's see if there's any public comment before Pat and I sort of go through your 8 questions.
We do not have public.
We do not have any. Okay, well, then let's get started. Unless you have an alternative way you prefer to progress. Oh, okay, all right.
Chair Baker, someone did just raise their hand. Would you like to?
Sure.
All right, so our first speaker is Brett. Brett, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, welcome.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, hi, I was at the working group meeting and really liked what we heard. It's a pretty robust analysis and kind of fits with common sense in terms of our understanding of the the profitability of these types of deferment strategies. My one question that I didn't ask before that I hope can be addressed is whether there will be some type of time of export pricing for the energy to motivate people to do storage and solar. And eventually when they have automobiles that can also tie into the grid and into the home, will there be kind of a peak rate for exporting energy to the utility? That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any others?
No, that concludes public.
Okay. All right, great. Actually, I'm curious about that. If staff wants to address whether there's any type of export rates contemplated.
We have that in place with our net energy metering right now.
There we are. Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate the analyses, and while preliminary, there are deep analyses that went into this, and that there's a lot of recommendations around promoting various technologies, but not necessarily incentive programs. And I think that's true of. We start with item 1, promote ways community members can reduce emissions by reducing peak period load once time of use rates are launched. And we recommend promoting those technologies and behaviors, but not pursuing technical assistance programs or technology incentives. Based on what you presented in the staff report, I don't.
Should we put that
Yeah,
back
let's
up on
put
the
the
screen?
slide up.
Yeah, let's put
That's
the staff report
slide
back on the
what?
slide 13.
Yeah, and
in
General
the
Chair,
copy.
Oh, right, you actually inserted one.
Yeah.
were you suggesting we go through those 1 through 8 one at a time and just take any comments on them?
Yes,
Okay,
I was
great.
gonna go back and forth and see if either of us have comments on those, and just, it seemed like there's only two of us, it seems like a good way to organize, and since that's what you're requesting feedback on, and might be easier, just have a conversation on each. So, yeah, so I was just referencing item 1, and I was looking at the staff report, which gives a little more detail about your recommendation, in this instance. Helping promote these technologies and people understanding that they can save money, but not necessarily having an incentive program. And, based on the data you showed in the staff report, I think it was topic 1, but that attachment A, that makes sense to me. I know you mentioned, well, I'll just leave it at that. Do you have anything you want to say about item 1 there?
Well, before going into the individual ones, I have a couple overriding questions. So one is, what point in time are we using for the costs and the benefits?
It's the best forecast that we have coming out of our electric front office models.
For what point in time?
The next 30 years.
But that changes, so I'm not
It
following.
does. So
We're saying at this point in time, we've got a certain cost benefit. Which point in time is that? Is that today?
it was forecasts as of, I think the data was pulled probably in the early spring. I don't know whether Julian, you
But based on current costs and current cost of electricity, current cost of storage, is that what that's what?
current costs of equipment. Yes, but let me potentially asterisk that. Julian, do you want to add anything to that? Were there any projected reductions in costs or in equipment costs incorporated?
No, it addresses the projections for changes in utility costs over time. So we have those projections built in for the payback and the energy cost savings. But on the capital cost, it was done in today's dollars.
Okay, so first on the projected electricity cost, did you go to Palo Alto specific electricity costs and what we have in our 5-year anticipated cost increases?
It was not a retail analysis. So the supply cost is about utility supply cost savings, not about the savings to the customer. Now, when we did the program analysis, those program analyses do have customer profiles. So there can be situations where the customer, potentially saves a bunch of money because if they're reducing their retail rates, but then that provides a cost to the utility as a whole. And those details will be in the final report. But this cost benefit is for the community as a whole. Is it worthwhile for the community to do this? Will it reduce overall community energy supply costs? And the answer is no in most cases, based on current capital costs.
And then on the current capital costs, when we're looking at solar and storage, we've had for the last 20 years a phenomenal trend on solar reduction. What about 90% reduction in 20 years? It's still projected to decline. Whether the rate of decline will continue on the rate it's been, which is despite all kinds of different predictions and factors, every time we double the global installed base, it goes down by 20%. And for a whole variety of reasons, but over a 20-year period, it's almost pretty close to a straight line on that. But what we're seeing right now is a pretty drastic reduction in the storage costs. And as we've been looking at a lot of this on storage, I'm not particularly interested in our current storage costs and the cost benefit there. I'm interested in the going forward projections. And those are projected to be very significant declines across kind of pretty much all of the storage technologies and sectors, not equal in everyone, but very significant across all of them. So I would want to see our cost benefit based upon the projected costs, not the current cost.
So essentially, what you'd be asking us to reflect is, if it's not a positive cost benefit to do incentives now, will it be in 5 years
Or even 3.
or 3?
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, this is changing that rapidly, and especially on one of the scenarios where it gets close in the next 2 or 3 years, that could be a significant change. Okay, and so that would be real important to me, because we're just this year, within months, will be behind us. We're looking in the rearview mirror. We got to look at forward. And then I guess just one other high level question on, as we've looked at residential storage and how whether we would incentivize it. I wasn't clear on what we're assuming in terms of the trends that are occurring in residential solar and storage, independent of new incentives, and what are the numbers in terms of how much storage, solar and storage, do we have, and what are we seeing? So much of that decision making is not being based upon real cost benefits by those residents. So how do we leverage those kind of inherent trends toward our benefit versus what do we have to drive and make happen, and then we can take advantage of it?
Yeah. So this is where the promotion and outreach and resources and reducing barriers helps. So we have I believe, and don't quote these as firm numbers, but I believe we're close to around 21 megawatts of solar in Palo Alto at this point. And we get in the range of, I think, 30 to 100 kilowatts installed every year, residential. I don't see a lot of commercial projects going in, but I'm also a little bit out of touch at this point with the project by project activity. So we do some things to promote that right now. We provide information on our website. We also have done our SunShares group buy program in the past. And we have, and I think this may have lapsed, but we've provided a PV calculator in the past as well as permit streamlining. So to build on that, as we start to roll out time of use rates, providing people information about how best to use their storage systems. And then this also applies to electric vehicles as well, giving them information about when to charge their vehicles. All of these things could help leverage these technologies to the community's benefit without a bunch of extra investment in incentives or even a lot of operating cost.
Well, once again, I really want to look at that, what we project, because we have a strong baseline. My understanding is now that the vast majority of residents who are putting in solar are coupling it with storage.
Yeah.
And with our current electricity rates, there's not a real good economic basis for those decisions, and yet we see a lot of it. But in the next few years, we're going to have our electricity rates going up pretty substantially, and the cost of the equipment going down substantially. And where is that tipping point at which the economic benefits really start to take hold? And we may see an acceleration in that in our community, including on the commercial side. And so once again, we're looking at our present point in time, and that's a valuable, starting point. But when I'm looking at decisions, they're all going forward decisions. And so they need to be based on going forward projections. And the return on investment, or the cost benefits for these, is changing and maybe, as I say, reaching a tipping point. So I don't know how we incorporate that.
Sounds like a similar projection to
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So that's actually good news, because if the cost of equipment go down, cost of electricity goes up, and there's an economic incentive, in addition to what appears to be as sort of the best guess in the report is people who want that resiliency, want the storage, want all that, and can afford it, whether or not it has that economic incentive, this would get better. So that seems to me to support staff saying, let's not pursue incentives at this time if we're already getting some, and we're like that, depending on, now, your point is, if we knew that that tipping point was closer than further, based on go forward, we could have even more assurance. But right now, I'm inclined to, you know, without knowing more about that, I'm inclined to go along with the staff recommendation to not add incentives on top of it at this time. I don't know if you have a different view on that point.
No, in one sense that, as the trends of increased electricity costs and decreased equipment costs proceed, the need for subsidies or incentives is diminished.
Right.
The potential for us to leverage what the residents and the businesses are already going to be doing on their own increases.
Yes.
And so I want to get a better sense of what we project in terms of opportunities going forward to leverage more and not necessarily to subsidize more.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm saying is yes, I agree with all that, because you've added more fuel and reasons to what I think is being suggested, and that makes me happy. So thank you for pointing that out. But I think it ends up that for the moment, we're kind of on board with the don't incentivize much further. Which I think was one of your general, I mean, you'll see it embedded in a lot of these, but yeah, I don't know exception to that leaps to my mind. Yeah, so I think we're kind of aligned on that from us.
Can you remind me the acronym CASC, what that stands for? I couldn't find it in the.
Climate Action Sustainable Community.
Our committee. That's our.
So
Have to, we don't make me straps or t-shirts. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Keep trying to get it to be CNS instead of PNS, but it wouldn't be, because then we lose the action, and the action's important, so. All right. Have to work on the branding. Okay, so do you need more on item one, just to make, I just don't want to skip anything here. I think that kind of covered, I mean, that it's specific to time of use, but it's basically, I think, incentives versus promotion and other ways.
No, I think that's enough. And I think numbers 2, 3, and 4 are
similar,
are pretty much the same. They're just listing different technologies.
Right, okay. Agreed. Let's go past these. Although I might have a question, just 1 minute. Because your 8 at the end aren't necessarily lined up in the same order as the 5 at the beginning, so I want to.
I got you.
Just give me a second here. I think I had well, I can't find it, so let's move
And
on.
I'll just say on 3, it says, don't provide incentives unless benefit to cost ratios change. I mean, I want to get in there. We know they're going to change. First, our electricity costs are going up, and we should have a high confidence that the equipment costs are going to decline. We may want to use whichever there are established low, medium, and high projections, and which one of those we pick. I don't know which is the correct one, but they're all projecting declines. There's nobody projecting that we aren't going to decline in those costs. And so I think we need to reframe this around those expectations, and whether, and I want to see us include a consideration other than subsidies, is how do we take actions to leverage what's going to be happening, and greater potential adoption at whatever point that is to have a plan on and think through how we might best leverage what's happening, as opposed to cause an acceleration in that.
Yeah, and I guess the question is how much of that, so if we capture that intent and focus for future, how much of that do we have to, crystallize now? But I think
we can take, I think this is helpful feedback. These aren't things we're going to write word for word in the report. And I think you've given us a good sense of how to, how to frame things in the final report.
Great, thanks.
I'm still struggling to find exactly what I was looking at, but could you just for my edification, vehicle to grid was buried in there, and there's a note somewhere about the technology costs associated with it. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that technology is and why it's costly associated with B2G?
So I will say it's not so much that it's costly as that it's costly relative to the small benefit that demand response provides, and essentially vehicle to grid ends up being demand response in a lot of ways. Julian, you have some insights on exactly what pieces of technology it is. I believe it's the additional technology that you need to install to be able to respond to a grid signal, right?
Yeah, there's a few components. You've got a bidirectional charger, which will be a more expensive charger than the standard kind of level 2 charger. And there's more becoming available, but there's not that many of them right now. And then you're gonna you need a smart panel or an interconnect or something to be able to feed that back in. And there's a few different ways of doing that. Either with panel upgrades or potentially with the kind of meter collars as well. So there's a few different kind of routes to integrate that, but then you need some kind of smart control integrated in with that to control when it's going to charge and discharge.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, we don't have to.
It's still,
that helps me understand the two-way charger and the related hardware.
and this is developing quite quickly, the technology here.
So similarly, it'll probably become more common and cheaper over time, but yeah.
Yeah, you would imagine as these features are built into equipment that's installed in the future, it might become cheaper.
Okay. And so then I guess we're on 5, is that right? That's larger scale solar and battery. And that's the one that comes closer to making cost benefit economic sense at this point in time.
Right now with the investment tax credit, but I expect that to fall really significantly. Just for context, when we ran a back of the envelope for the airport microgrid, without the ITC, the power purchase price agreement price went up 50%.
50.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's discouraging.
Right.
Yeah.
Very back of the envelope, but it's not going to be small.
So on this one, I'm not super clear on the recommendation. You say a program including a commercial customer monthly on-bill financing or third-party ownership of utility PPA may avoid some of the challenges. What are you?
Mostly what this says is, in a lot of words, is look at commercial solar and storage projects on a case by case. And there was a suggestion from the UAC to just acknowledge that even if we didn't do widespread commercial local solar and storage investment, we would likely be pursuing it at the utility scale in other places, just to make sure that we're very clear about that.
Yeah, I see. And since it's large scale, you can do the case by case more readily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how we've done it so far, and I think we just keep doing that.
And I'm sorry, and this says utility scale solar and storage, but we're also looking at just storage, right?
Yeah, just storage and other renewables. Yes, we are. So it doesn't say it, but yes, we are.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Please do. Okay. So 6, monitor up, and I'm looking at the staff report. So if it's slightly reworded in the slides. I'm not capturing it.
I tried to align them.
Okay. So monitor opportunities for distribution, distribution investment deferral. So this is the one that didn't work out so well. You were describing in detail with respect to the 364 or however many transformers and the capital cost of the batteries and the savings for the debt service for each, and it kind of didn't come out.
Yes.
Right. And again, that's looking at today's dollars, but I get nervous personally about the distribution investment deferral because of the other thing you mentioned, which is reducing the grid modernization efficiency and, skipping a transformer and trying to align households around efficiencies and things. I don't know. I just think there's an awful lot of variables here without a lot of return. So would agree with what I think was your bottom line, which was that it's not promising to pursue. I mean, one could, but I'm not excited about it. I'm curious though, Pat, what do you think about this one?
I think it ties into these other questions I had earlier, which is really, what are we going to be seeing in the next few years? And so that falls under the monitor opportunities, but I kind of think of it more than just monitoring. I want to project where we think we're going to be, as opposed to keep looking at what just happened.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes good sense. I think for me that since part of the whole RRSP is community confidence, it's sort of interrupting the grid modernization and skipping things here and there. I think has a weird subjective effect on that as well.
Can I ask a question? Just following on that. So if we were to project, for example, and it'd be great, can we go back to slide slide 8, please. So let's say hypothetically we ended up finding that battery costs are projected to go down 50% in 3 years. And now we're seeing that instead of, $1 million per year, less $650,000 in battery costs. And then you have to add on program costs and operations and maintenance. So you're kind of almost eating up that entire $1 million. I guess, is there a number on this item where this becomes a worthwhile thing to pursue further? Because I see the value in doing those projections around a lot of other technologies and understanding where we can take advantage of them. But in this case, should we consider this any further?
Is this too small of a potential benefit?
Yeah, should we spend any more time on this, even with projections? And given the technical complexity and the fact that we're not, a PG&E with or a SMUD with a crack innovations team who can experiment with stuff like this.
Yeah, I think you're right on that.
Okay, appreciate that. Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. And you did a good job of explaining that in the staff report, the economies of scale and the size of our utility and such. And so I think it was a really interesting sort of thought experiment to explore, but without clear reason to go forward, I think it just could be a distraction without a clear benefit. So, okay. Where are we? 7. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Microgrids, and backup power. Yes, so I know, so I get excited about this, and I know, Pat's long championing a lot of this. I like the idea that we can replace the backup diesel and generators. You had a lot of questions up in the staff report, that if we supported this, to talk about the why and the purpose, identify the purpose and all of that. And talking about assistance and incentives on this one. So do you still want that kind of detail after talking to the UAC, or where are you on that?
Well, the UAC my takeaway was that they were mostly aligned with that they were mostly aligned with wanting to keep our current policies, that those who see value in long-term resiliency could put in their own microgrids, but that we wouldn't subsidize those or pursue them. We would, facilitate them to the extent that people need help, barrier reduction, and that's what we've maintained up here. So but there was an interest in this long-term resiliency question that we need to get our heads around what it means to have power during a major emergency. And so keep talking about that question. And I don't think we have a firm idea of what that path forward is going to look like. But we heard that loud and clear. And if that were the same thing the committee wanted, we could carry that forward. Or if there was an interest in pursuing incentives, then we could talk about that here today.
I mean, I think a lot of this is similar to what we've been discussing about not that interested in incentives. If we can avoid them, we need a clearer look into the future. But I do think the long-term efficiency is a big deal. I think that long-term resiliency is a big deal, and I think that we definitely need to do what we can, and part of it will be let's see how it goes, right? But yeah, I definitely think this is something that's key. I guess I would agree, concur with the UICs, what they said.
Yeah, and I think we have kind of a range of scales, and the item 8 being kind of an example of one of our potentially largest projects, and that we get better economy at scale. And so I continue to be interested in us looking at what are the best prospective microgrids that would allow us to reduce the costs, either because it's at a scale or because it's integrated with another construction project that builds efficiency into it, such as the Coverly Master Plan. And so that might be one occasion where we want to look hard at integrating solar in that master plan, and solar and storage perhaps, as we do other significant construction. So then I'll wait on 8. I'm jumping at the middle.
I bet you are. Yeah, no, I in some of the earlier ones, where you're doing the cost benefit analysis and expressly said that valuing long-term resiliency was not sort of part of that cost benefit analysis. And even then I thought, well, why? Because I think it's such a big deal to our residents in terms of confidence. And even though our utilities have been very good at staying up and having little downtime and all of that, it just gives people that extra confidence. And so I think that here, where we're looking at this long-term resiliency, it's really important. And I was glad to see it when we got to this item. So with that, let's move on to item 8, which I was excited to see a very interesting discussion of that and the interplay with RWQCP and PPAs. But since you're chomping at the bit, I'll let you comment first.
Yeah, well, there were 2 aspects to this that I didn't see in the report, or at least in the presentations, and it may be in the report, but one is the way in which solarization and storage at the airport would not only potentially support the quality control plant, but the electrification of the airport and electric planes and that whole trend. And the presentation that Brad and I had received from this consortium of companies that are involved with electrifications of airports, who had identified Palo Alto Muni for a variety of reasons as a prime target, maybe they're number 1. They said as a secondary benefit would be the ability to provide reliability and resiliency for the wastewater treatment plant. But foremost was the airport itself and the trends that they're seeing there. The second thing in the cost benefit modeling for that, after we did the airport master plan in '06, and at that time, electric planes were not a twinkle in anyone's eye. But we could talk about solarizing the airport nevertheless. And what we did, and I met with a solar developer on this who had done something similar. The back of the napkin analysis was that the revenue from selling the value of the awnings for $1 million planes that are sitting out in storms and baking in the sun exceeded the revenue from the ground lease for the solar. And you put them together, and it was a very different economic benefit. Sort of like when we put solar on top of our parking garages, we've never monetized the value of, or attempted to estimate of, normally that's the last place anybody wants to park. And so the solar installer, when I brought it up to him, he said, well, that's interesting because I had put the solar in at the Tiburon Ferry parking lot. And I went back a year later, just a month ago, to check on how it was doing. And the guy at the gate said $5 or $10. $5 to park in the sun, $10 to park under the solar panels. And you do a back of the napkin on how much revenue incremental increase, that is really big. So I want to make sure that we're not looking at just the one factor. It is not a secondary factor. It may be the biggest cost benefit factor is to be able to sell that value.
Can I speak to those two things?
You bet.
All right, so let's take the awnings first. We estimated what it would take to get that $235 per megawatt hour PPA price down to $80 to $90 per megawatt hour, more in line with what remote solar looks like. And it's about $2.5 million per year. So if there's enough resiliency value through the entire airport, and this goes to the e-aviation as well, if there's $2.5 million of resiliency value per year through in the airport, EV charging depot, most importantly, the water quality control plant, and that paying that $2.5 million per year is the most economic way to achieve the backup power needs for all those entities. Because it may be that some other solution, I think you can acknowledge the need for backup power in the aviation, but whether solar and storage has to be the right way to deliver that, that's the second question. And so there may be some other alternatives.
And I'm sorry, it wasn't necessarily backup. This is for routine charging, right?
Well, routine charging, the alternative would be increasing the capacity of the airport's interconnections so that it can deliver as much energy as is needed for all that e-aviation. You don't need a solar and storage for that. So, so now going to the awnings, that $2.5 million per year, that reduces to about 2.3 million per year when you take the awnings into account. So it's not nothing, but it doesn't change the equation dramatically, unfortunately.
Okay. Is that all detailed in the report?
So I believe some of it's only detailed at a high level, but is the awning revenue in there in the report? Okay, so it would be in the appendix to the report focused on the programs. Yeah.
If I could just make a comment, just on the question of the routine use of the power, it was really interesting as Jonathan reviewed that essentially in the summer with the peak output from that solar system, it essentially matched the energy use of the treatment plant. Remember, it said something like 30 to 45 days of backup. So just an interesting side fact that the size of the solar system that could fit on the airport during peak season essentially matches the power use of the treatment plant.
Do you have any thoughts around like timetable, like if you were to, let's say, for example, determine the partnership to develop the microgrid between the airport and the water quality control plant was, makes sense, like how far off are we talking? Because I assume that's not a simple thing to.
I mean, the big question is it by the end of next year? So you're gonna have construction started and get the ITC, and we don't see a viable path forward to that. As for how long it could be otherwise, I defer to Brad.
Well, I mean, the one piece of it all out is we've discussed that we were kind of on a pause for the long range planning for the airport this year, and we're planning to pick that up next year. So I would hope that, you know, that's gonna be still a process in itself, even to make these decisions about, are there any changes to layouts and things at the airport? And are we trying to include all this future solar and other types of electrification in a plan that's not changing the footprint of the airport, right? But is making these other types of improvements.
So there needs to be some kind of handshake between, in order to do these kinds of things, there would have to be some kind of handshake between the long range plan for the airport and this kind of a backup.
Yeah.
I
mean,
but that
I
would
would,
be a forum for exploring this stuff. So.
yeah, and I would add to that when I talk about like there any changes there could be at the airport, like we talked about a lot in this apron area with the tie down. This is where we put the underground infrastructure so that we can add this. So we wouldn't want to make significant changes there that meant we were starting over on that piece of the infrastructure.
I see. Got it. Okay, well, interesting. Well, it's I mean, exciting to think about the potential of all of this, but okay, so do you need anything more from us on this item?
I think we're covered.
Okay, well, thank you, and thanks for all the work that you're gonna go do on this, but key stuff, very important. You have anything else in this one? Nope. Okay, I think we are good with that. So the only other thing is the next meeting, which we talked about at the top of the meeting. Unless you have anything more to say about our, well, I guess we'll set down figure out the time for September 5, right?
Yeah, we'll do that. I
Okay.
think we already mentioned what the topics were.
Yep. Excellent.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you. Good work on a Friday, all.
Thank you. That's a lot of work you did.
We're adjourned.